Hello, hello, everyone. Today is December 9th. This is a release engineering subproject meeting for SIG release. This is a meeting that will be recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, and in general, just be awesome people. So we've got a few special guests on the call today, our friends from SIG Docs. We wanted to talk about, I was chatting with Bob on Friday, I believe, about some branch weirdness that happened. And I don't know if you guys want to expound on that a little bit, but we wanted to talk about some improvements that we could potentially do with your workflow. So.
Sure. I'll at least fill in some of the details on some of the problems that happened with the docs for 117. Some time ago, a PR was merged and everything was good. The person had a signed CLA, but the time it was merged into the Dev 117 branch and the PR being cut for it to be merged into master, they essentially switched jobs and no longer had access to that email or anything like that, and had signed the CLA with a new address, and they had no way of correcting the previous one. So the plan was to essentially rebase the branch and remove the commit and add essentially the same changes as a new one. But when doing this process, there were a whole slew of like conflicts and other things like that. And we wound up having to cherry pick all the, enhancement or, the changes for 117 into a new branch and essentially force push that over the current dev branch. And I don't know the docs workflow too well, but it looked like during the release process, they will merge, like periodically merge master into the dev release branch, and just sort of keep it sort of in sync with master. And this is very similar sort of to the workflow that's done with KREL-FF, and just keeping things in sync. The other possible alternative, instead of keeping the branch in sync that way, would be to essentially just periodically rebase off master instead of doing the merge from one to the other. I would again sort of leave that to what would be the best workflow for docs.
Well, Bob, first, thank you for all of your help with Gwen resolving that what became a much hairier situation than I think any of us realized going in. So just wanted to say how valuable it was to have you there. As far as whether to take the KREL FF approach or rebase, we have some experience in a release cycle with rebasing. Off of master during the release cycle, and it worked well sort of at the base level, but if there were any open docs PRs, they also had to rebase as well, and that grew very annoying. So we did that for the 1.12 release and then returned to merging master in 1.13. It's entirely possible that there's a better way to rebase onto master than we were doing in 1.12. But based on our limited experience, we figured that merging master into the branch was going to be a saner approach, require less active maintenance from folks who are just trying to contribute feature PRs.
Yeah, when we were going through it, after fixing it, there was like something like 80 things that needed to be touched, and that was a bit overwhelming, especially on a Friday afternoon. That's why we wound up just like rebasing and going that route on Friday.
Yeah, so I think in general that the merging into the I guess the release branch or feature branch is a better move than and than trying to do the rebase. I open it to thoughts, really.
So what would it take to test and implement something like this?
Good. So we've been using the branch fast forward tool for at least as long as I've been in and around the release team. We recently started on a path to rewrite the shell tools in Go, and I'm going to link that issue in to the notes. So essentially, what we're doing is we've created a toolbox, a release manager's toolbox called Krell, or Kubernetes release toolbox. I couldn't have thought of something more imaginative, but so yeah, so little by little we're working on migrating those tools from shell over to Go, and one of the first tools that we chose, since it's small enough and it's used fairly often enough, was branch fast forward. So there is an open PR right now so branch fast forward currently does a few things, right? It does it does a merge into the release branch in question, but it also runs release open API, update open API spec, which is a hack within Kubernetes. That essentially makes sure that the version that lands on the release branch within the open API spec is the version that that release branch is targeting. So that's not necessarily something that branch fast forward should be doing. So we're working on removing that, but due to like actual important work, we punted that for the next cycle. So that's one thing that remains to be done before we can actually turn on Krell fast forward. But I think that we should plan to do that for 118. I think that's the Open API spec update is the last thing that needs to be fixed before that tool can be turned on, and adding, I guess, more test coverage. I just popped a link for that tracking issue in the doc. So I think what would be helpful to have is someone who is both familiar with the release engineering stuff and the docs workflow. And I'm looking at you, Jim. I think you might be the best person to work on this, actually.
Yeah, I'd be open to assist with this and kind of be the intermediary piece here between the two SIGs.
Cool. All right, so I'll assign that the docs migration or the docs usage of GrellFF issue to you, and we'll keep y'all posted on the removal of the of the update API spec. There's one more piece that we'd like to have in place, which is being able to test the fast forward workflow via some repo that isn't necessarily a personal repo. So there's also discussion about Kubernetes feature forks.
For the Open API spec piece, that's more of a wish list on the release engineering side. It's not really a blocker per se, or is it just blocking the refactoring of all this?
It is a blocker because honestly, we should not be doing any updates within a branch fast forward. It should simply just be the fast forward process, right? So we're essentially fast forwarding and then adding more commits onto the branch, which doesn't sound great. We'll also need to tweak the current tool so that it can accept, I think it already accepts arbitrary orgs, but it'll need to accept arbitrary repos and definitions of what a release branch is, right? Because currently it assumes that the release branch is release dash something, right? Release dash 1.17 or something. So I know that docs uses dev dash one dev-x.y for your release branches or for your pre-release branches?
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
for pre-release.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, what we want is essentially we want a fork of Kubernetes within the Kubernetes org that we can use as essentially an integration test, right? For integration tests. So I'll open an issue for that today, and kind of tie all the threads together. I think most of them are already tied together, but I'll check on that. Cool. Also, if anyone is interested in taking notes, feel free to hop on the doc. All right. Questions from docs before we continue? Comments, concerns, all that good stuff?
I am all in favor in anything that makes our release process less hairy, because right now it seems sort of teratogenic, meaning that everything looks perfectly fine, and then oh my god, monsters!
Like,
Yeah. So what? I'm not familiar with KREL fast forward at all. So what will it actually look like? What will the actual syntax of maintaining and updating release branches look like?
yeah, sure. So let's do this. Cool. And everyone can see my screen? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Yep. All right, so let's do cd curl. Right. Cool. All right, so curl. Right, so that is the top level command for curl. The fast forward would look like this, right? So essentially, curl takes, it would be curl, fast forward, branch, and then the release branch, we could say blah, blah, blah. Right, and then some ref if you want to use a, so the default ref would be head, which would be the head of the master branch. This is the master ref, right? If you wanted to choose an arbitrary commit, you could do that. And then, yeah, let's go with that. Right, so right now what it's doing is cloning Kubernetes, right? This is not actually going to do anything because it's going to bail out because this branch doesn't exist, and this ref doesn't exist. And if it doesn't, then
There are bigger problems in play if that works.
But I can, as it's doing that, I can. Oh, let's not do that. Actually, I've got some. I've got some potentially sensitive things up, so. Yep. Great, awesome, super. Okay. Let's just say I showed you what the code looked like. Here.
I, for one, was really impressed how you did that git reset hard and you didn't even pause for a second. Like, could this be a problem? That was very smooth. Very smooth.
It's a part of my usual workflow. So I know the things that are not checked in are things that I don't want checked in. So everything else is pretty fun. So essentially, we're using Cobra to kind of like mock our CLI commands and or create our CLI commands, right? So you can see Cobra use the short and long usages of this thing, an example of how to use it, and then the actual command, which is just the run ff, right? So before we're getting started, it's pulling in, it's checking for a branch, master ref, and an org, and setting that in the fast forward options. Then the fast forward options are passed into run ff, right? So it's doing if the branch is empty, then it's going to ask you to specify a release branch. It's setting the master ref. It's stuff things. Remotify, I think it's checking if if master is a remote, or no, it's taking origin and slash and master and concatenating those. Then opening the repo, it's checking if you want to run this in a no mock mode, which is essentially how we set most of our tools up, which I should have remembered, which is why this won't do anything. This is fine because I didn't set no mock here. So it's essentially a dry run of that process. We've also got so it's going to do, it's going to check if this is a release branch, right? And we can see what that looks like here. Basically saying it looks at this branch regex and sees if that branch regex, if the branch that you supplied matches that regex, which my computer froze for a little bit, but that regex is somewhere, right? So either master or release and the rest of this, right? Release, basically this turns into, some set of one dot blah, right? It's checking to see if the branch is available on the remote. So actually, if the branch matches the release regex, which we'll have to modify to support the K website, and then 2, if the remote branch actually exists, right? So then it checks it out. It checks to see if you want to clean up your local, because essentially what this is doing is cloning a copy of that repo in a separate temporary directory, right? So you can see it returned here. It's using dry mode, which does not modify any remote content, and it checked and failed because the release branch is not a release branch, right? So somewhere on my local, oh good, right? Really? Okay, I guess it's temp. Okay, so I guess it cleaned up, or it cleaned up since it failed, right? So it looks for a merge base tag. Merge base tag is basically a common ancestor between the two branches, between the master branch and the release branch, or between the master ref that you choose and the release branch, and then uses that as the basis for the fast forward, merges the changes into the master changes into the release branch, and then gives you a nice little message that says, hey, you should go and check this out. Like, here's where the stuff is located. Go and check this out using git status, git show, git log. Git log will tell you where the future diff of the two commits will be, and how to compare it on GitHub once it actually exists. So, and then lastly, it'll say, are you ready to push that local branch fast forward upstream, right? And this will ask you 3 times, and it'll expect yes as an answer. And if it doesn't get that, it'll bail out. So there are a few kind of backstops to prevent you from doing bad things. Any questions on that?
So at the very end here, it would catch any merge conflicts or any sort of conflicting files.
It would take the master. So it's doing a, where is it? It's doing a, basically it's doing a merge hours strategy. Well, sorry, it used to be written in Bash. Essentially, if you see what's our right. So this is what the current tool is doing, is doing a merge with the hours merge strategy, which means it's going to take what's on the branch that you're choosing, the master branch, and use that as the source of truth, right? So so it'll prevent conflicts by choosing master as the most accurate content. Would that be a problem?
Gotcha, potentially. So since we work predominantly out of master as our upstream documentation of the current release, there's times where a dev will commit a PR to the dev branch, which is different than our release branch. That you might have something to master that's the source of truth. You also might have something in that dev branch that's the source of truth that wants to be changed from master.
Okay, so you prefer the dev branch to be treated as the source of truth?
Almost of it could be taken on a case by case basis, but I know that'd be a pain for folks who can just do like a merge X hours.
Yeah. So that's something you'd have to figure out.
Hooray!
Yay! But yeah, outside of that, I think the tool, I want to say the people who have, so myself, Sasha, and Dan, who have been working on it, like it's done, right? Functionality wise. Yeah, so adding support for merge strategy, adding support for arbitrary non-Kubernetes repos or non-Kubernetes repos would be pieces that you'd need to do, and then making sure that that stuff is probably properly covered via tests. So, sound good?
Yeah, it'd be nice if someone who's a little bit more well versed in Git could assist, with me on that, or at least tackling the, it'd be nice if we could implement something that just says, the merge strategy is, you choose the kind of the way forward there. I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah, so good question. We'll have to poke at it. So in the meantime, I'm going to assign you, and I'll assign Sasha and Dan.
If you need Git help, you can assign me too.
Okay. I'll wait to assign you, Bob. I'll assign Sasha and Dan, who have been working on the tool migrations. So we'll say this is to do, and I think it's labeled up properly. Cool. And away we go. All right. So Jim, if you don't mind adding the notes into that issue, just so we have an up-to-date status of what we need to do.
Yep, can do that.
Awesome.
Sorry, which issue, sorry?
It's linked in the doc. It's this 956 and Kubernetes release.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. And I think you're already on that issue, so you'll get updates.
Excellent.
Good. All right. Any more questions on this one? Comments, concerns? Cool. All right. Well, Sig Docs, thank you for taking some time to hang out with us today.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Moving on to Hannes. Hannes, you're on the call. Cool.
Yo,
Yo.
hello
um,
everybody.
so you wanted to talk about the test grid migration.
Yeah, I tried to update some types we use in the current release tooling because they moved from K test infra to Google Cloud Platform Test Grid.
Mhm.
However, I have no idea about Bazel and I banged my head against it, didn't work. So please help. Anybody who knows anything about Bazel, fix it
So
for me, please.
so I've assigned Eric and Jeff to that, and I'm going to ping them in the channel right now. It's Yeah, it's beyond my skill set at, at this point. Basil always finds a way to throw me for a loop. But essentially, what's happening? Christoph said that we're not generating build files for the protobufs, so they're kind of violating the sandbox, right? The Basil sandbox.
Yeah, I tried to build them by flipping a flag in the wherever that is repo Bazel config. So it built the proto files, but still Bazel complained anyway. So yeah, I honestly I have no idea what Bazel, how it works, what it does. It's pretty much a black box magic thingy for me. But I assume if you know some stuff about Bazel, it's probably an easy fix because it's not like a ridiculous thing we are doing there.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love our Basil experts to weigh in. So Christoph mentioned some stuff on the issue, but I think that between Eric and Jeff, they'll have the answer, and they'll probably have it almost immediately. We just need to get them around the issue.
Yeah. Sweet. So next point, images.
Yes, images. You and I have been thinking about this in separate streams, and now we get to combine forces.
Yeah, as a first part, I just want to check if I'm right. So my assumption is we figured out how we build images with we built them on GCP and potentially in the future commit them via or maybe we already do that via the test infra builder thingy. But we have not figured out how we promote those images. I mean, probably we will use the image promoter, which is in the works by Linus, but we don't have any processes or tests or whatever set up. Is that correct?
It's so can we build images? Yes. Can we promote them? Maybe.
Manually.
Yes and no simultaneously, right? So so the image promotion process works, and the test coverage has gone up in that since I think that issue that you may be.
Wait. What is the image promotion process you are talking about?
What do you mean?
What is it? Like, is
Oh,
it you running
no.
a
So
tag and then push, or what is it?
no, there is an actual image promotion process, right? For the okay, right. So Kates.io, which is a repo that I only found out existed like beginning of the year, I guess. There's a doc about maintaining the Kubernetes container images. Each SIG or project has their own. So I'll use Cluster API Azure as an example since I'm familiar with that one. Has their own images set, right? So one, the owners are defined, and you define them as whoever's, usually whoever's maintainers or approvers for that repo. And then the image set here, right? This is essentially the SHA of the image that we want to promote and the tag
Right.
that it needs to be.
That
Right?
is the config for Linus's image promoter, right?
Exactly, right.
But
So
we as release.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So the problem that we have is release, and this is, I think a few of you are following this one, but you will, if you're not, It is here, right? So there are a bunch of things to do before some of this works, right? So the problem that we have right now is that the images that we create, we can easily push them to Kubernetes or K8s staging release test, right? Which is our test staging release, test release staging bucket, right? Very confusing. So the first thing I want to do is fix the names, right? So we've got K8s staging release test, and then K8s release test prod, right? Which, you know, they kind of like violate any convention. So they kind of adhered to the initial convention that they had for the staging buckets and or the staging projects. And what I was saying to the K8s infra is that release isn't really a staging thing. Like our staging is kind of prod or near prod, right, for any release related thing. So we need to have buckets and names and policies around those things that reflect that. So there's some work in progress to make it easier. And so right now we have it's.io, and I want to say it's groups, maybe? Not groups, but what am I looking for? Right. So you've got this little scripty that people with access to admin access to the infra projects can run. Essentially, it takes these projects, goes in, looks at admins, writers, and viewers. So these lists were recently configured. And the SIG chairs, the patch release team, branch managers, and release manager associates are part of these lists. So it goes into the project, make sure the buckets are configured, right? Again, we don't really have staging buckets, right? Our staging buckets would be considered prod for a lot of people, right? So what we need to do is, one, figure out the names for these things. I'm planning on writing an issue up for that today, actually. Who is going to maintain them, how we need to tweak these scripts to do that stuff, and then we also need to figure out, do we need to promote backwards, right, into Google infrastructure, right? Or can we promote into new infrastructure, right? Into the K8s infrastructure, right? Because then we have to configure service accounts that can run GCP jobs or have access to drop images within from a new K8s infra staging project into an old Kubernetes release project, right? So the Kubernetes release test is where we primarily do most of our work, but there's also Kubernetes release, which I don't believe I actually have access to, which is our prod project. There's also where our containers land, Google containers, that namespace within GCRI is actually, there's an alias for it that's k8s.gcri.io, right? So there's a plan somewhere to cut that stuff over, but there are a lot of things in play that make this tricky, right? I know that, so going all the way back to what you said, yes, a promotion today would be me clicking the button to push an image from one registry to another, right? Retagging it and then pushing it to our registry. If it's something that like I don't have access to push prod images, right? So let's go back to the issue, or where? Okay, so yeah, that's the the roundabout way of saying yes, it's a manual process right now, but there are pieces that are automated. We just need to figure out how to get ourselves into that process. I also need to figure out if it's even possible for the image promoter, or like if the image promoter even has credentials to promote from K8s infra into a Google infra location, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, just wanted to check if it's true what I thought, that today the promotion is manual, and
yeah.
it is.
So so the plan, at least as soon as the release goes out, I know that you have updates to Kate's Cloud Builder, which are you had two updates. One was to move to Python 3, and then the other one was to remove some of the pieces that we didn't need. You stripped down a bunch of the image, right?
Yeah.
So I want to get those in, but only after we cut. Should we wait till, I was going to say after we cut 117, but should we wait until after the patch releases as well? Those are on Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah.
Or do we want to use the patch releases as our opportunity to test the image?
Let's test it there.
I think we should. Yeah, cool. Tim,
But it's not
grave
really.
concerns?
Sorry?
I said, Tim, any grave concerns about that?
No. No, I say with supreme confidence in my voice.
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about the specific image and the updates I made. It's a general question to see if I'm on the right page.
Yeah, no, I am concerned about the image though. So, because you actually pointed out, I thought it was promoted to the correct place, but we had since we had previously parameterized the namespace for the image that's used in the GCB stage and release configs. So, so I think when we did the post submit push of the new version of the image, it only pushed to staging release test. So yeah.
Yeah,
right.
honestly, it's fine. I just wanted this answer. I know that different people work on different stuff and stuff is ongoing. So yeah, that's a good enough answer for me, at least right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I spent way too long on over the weekend looking for where you had written this down. I was like, I know Hannes wrote this somewhere, and I was searching through issues. So I'm gonna get all of this stuff into an issue. The corollary to some of this stuff is the Debian base IP tables and Hypercube ones. There are two issues open for that, or rather, there were two issues open for CV remediation. That will be an ongoing issue because essentially the same thing is true. We don't have access to push to those image locations. So right now, Carlos and Arnaud are assigned to mitigating the Hypercube CV stuff. And I know you have a PR, Hannes, open for whatchamacallit, for rewriting. Okay, that's a meme.
Yep.
What happened? You have a PR open for rewriting the
yeah, basically the Docker files for Debian base, Debian IP tables, and Debian Hypercube base. Where I came from is, well, if there are CVEs in there, we need to fix them. Can we do it? No. What do we need to make that happen? My first thing was, well, can we build them on GCB and then eventually use the image promoter again? So this PR is making it at least easier to build them on GCP. So that works today with this PR. Still, the image promoter and all that business needs to be figured out. But at least we have that part. We can build those images anytime.
So yeah, so what I would request is for this PR, one, to use a git move, so we capture the diff between the Docker file and the Docker file.build that's in Debian base. Because right now it looks like it's an addition and a removal of a file instead of a rename. And two, to add a cloud build to this one, so we can wire up a post submit on Kubernetes to push to the staging release test bucket, right? That way, once we figure out like the last mile of this, which is promotion from release staging release test into whatever new prod or old prod is, we can just turn it on, and we'll already have images in there tagged properly, right? So if you can add that to this PR as well, and I'll review it when I get a chance.
Yep, will do.
Sweet. All right. Okay.
Good.
Next one is also you.
Also me. What is that? Should
The
release
release.
notify script send from GCP? My short answer is yes, I think it should. The longer answer, yeah?
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me just check with Carlos, Arno. Did you have questions on that stuff before we moved on?
A lot of questions, but maybe we speak in the channel or create another Zoom.
Okay. Okay. So I'll get that stuff updated so that we have a tracking issue for it.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, cool. All right. Sorry, Hannes, go for it.
No worries. So the question, should release notify send mails from GCP? My answer would be yes, it should. The thing is, it can't because the SMTP ports are blocked on Google Infra, but we could use stuff like, what is it called, SendGrid or
SendGrid,
whatever,
yeah.
or any other service we can find. I just happened to test with SendGrid that works well. I also kind of copy and pasted a thing I had running on over here anyway since a while for notifying for new patch, announcing new patch releases that uses SendGrid. I ported it to GCP, it just works, so we could use the same thing for the release notify script. Somewhere in some issue I have outlined what we would need for that. It's basically the most important thing we would need is a SendGrid account and a encrypted secret in our GCP project, and then a little bit of code change.
So can you, one favor, I was going to ask on that issue, why it wasn't possible. So can you explicitly document that it's because SMTP is blocked within
Sure.
Google? Just so in case anybody comes by, they have an answer for that. As for the patch announce PR, I would say that we should just merge that, no review, and then immediately work on migrating that to Krell. Yeah.
Okay, I just wonder why we want to merge it if we. But
so
fine.
we capture what we capture the working tool, right? Since you've already tested it, we've captured the working tool. But what I would like is if we didn't write any more tools that were non-Krell based, or rather that were non-Go based.
Yeah, I said that was I had that lying around and.
Yeah. I know you mentioned in the description of the issue too. So.
Yeah, sure, fine.
Cool. All right. And I know Carlos, you had popped on one of those issues too. It was the release notify print one, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah. So for print, I have never properly configured send mail on my computer. I pretty much just pull the subject and the body from the GCP.
Do the same.
Buckets, right, and send that way. But I always forget I always forget where the location is. So I think print would just be a nice convenience function for us to know exactly where the bucket location is, as well as get the output for the email to just copy and paste. So yeah, if that sounds good, you can go.
Yeah, and we changed this where? Just double check.
It's the release notify script.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
That breaks into lib release lib.sh, and there is a send announcement function within that one that you'd have to tweak.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Thank you. All right, next one, uniform logging facade in K-release repo. So I guess Sasha and Dan, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, it is more or less one of the things which were left over from the last discussion point. So yeah, the question is if we want to introduce another dependency like Logrus and stick to that instead of having the plain logging, which is not capable of having something like log levels.
Right. So how much are we, so first question, how much are we using log levels today?
The release notes tool uses it, but via GoKit.
Okay. And what was the initial, like, what was the impetus for moving away from GoKit?
Currently, we are using GoKit in the way that we are passing the logger around, and this introduces some, the obstacle that we have to pass the logger around. And to overcome this, we could simply use Logrus because we don't use the structured logging feature that much, I think so.
Okay. I know Logrus is used pretty extensively across Kubernetes repos. I just want to make sure that we're choosing a tool that other people know how to use when we, and that we choose one and we don't kind of like churn around which ones we want and which ones we don't want. So let's make a decision. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it's open for people to discuss before we move forward on it.
I don't know anything about Logrus, and I don't know if it like automatically installs itself in the global scope. If that's the case, I would argue against it. I would like to have something I can fake out and fake out in tests, and something that does not clutter my global namespace. And when it comes to passing the logger around, I think that's more of an, if you will, architectural problem of the release notes tooling more than anything else. Because if you had, I don't know, a proper structs where you slap the logger on it,
right,
and use that all the way down, that would change the game. I have this one concern about a logger that clutters my global namespace. Other than that, I really don't care.
Yeah, you can override the logger, right? So this is possible, but I think this is also possible via GoKit. So I think it's just a matter of to which tool we want to stick. So I would be also fine with just going with GoKit and implement it into the Krell tools as well.
Yeah, no, I'm easy. I'm super easy. Yeah, so Arno is mentioning Klog. I think Klog feels heavy for this purpose. There's also I'm trying to remember the name, but there is a Klog-like thing that is not Klog, but it is basically a rewrite of the standard logging package. Yes, so Dan, that's exactly what I was going to get to. I don't care what we go with as long as we're consistent. If we choose something, we should try to choose something that we can get help on if we need to across multiple repos. And if we choose something, we should also choose something that is consistent across our repo. So. Oh, okay.
I also opt against Klog. I think honestly, I'm a reviewer on Klog, but I don't really like Klog. It's a bit of weird of a thing.
Okay.
So I think we should use something more standard, I want to say, not only in Kubernetes, but generally standard for Go.
Yeah,
which
and so
would be Logrus or what have you. I don't care.
Yeah, so for Krell, that's why I initially chose to just use log, because it's part of the standard library. Yeah, whoever has opinions, if you have opinions, let's say Sasha, that's currently your issue. If you want to poke around some of the Kubernetes repos and get a pulse on what we're using across most of the repos.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that would be a good exercise. And then base your decision off of that. I'm happy to go with whatever works as long as it's consistent.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Thank you. And also add notes to your open PR regarding that. Cool. All right, I think okay, we managed to get through all the future topics. So open forum for 7 minutes.
Did we make a definitive decision on the testing last time? It was kind of a similar decision to this logging one. I felt like we were all kind of like, Dave Cheney says cool things, and yeah, So I didn't like as I've been working on stuff. I was just kind of going to conform to what we've done so far, but I'm not sure that's exactly in line with like table-driven tests and that sort of thing. So
yeah, so let's. Good question. Yeah, I thought
feel
that
like
was.
we weren't super clear on that, but we're sort of pragmatic, like go with which one makes the most sense in the case, where maybe a lot of the time it's table, but if that's not natural, don't do unnatural things to try to use a table test for a given scenario. And then that we did also need some integration tests that were a little more end-to-endy type of stuff.
for sure.
I
Yeah.
think
I think what you described, kind of going with what the pattern is, that's kind of the pragmatic approach we probably need to do.
what I heard last time, probably start with vanilla Go test type things, table driven or not. If you want to use Testify, because for a matcher basically, because we already have that in K-release. If that is not good enough for whatever you are doing, I guess we want to have a discussion before we pull in a different matcher, but maybe not. So
Yeah,
my point being, I would start with plain Go test, maybe use Testify for matching.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. I'm in favor of using just plain Go test. I think it's pretty good. So
Cool. Let's do that. So I was looking for the topics, and apparently it's on the SIG release agenda. So there is a action item assigned to me right now to set up a repo for use for integration testing. So I will work on that. All right. So over the last few days, I've been working on sprucing up some of our issues. All of the issues that were stale, rotten, have been refreshed in some way. I've started to remove myself from issues that I think that the rest of you can take, and we can like talk about. So there should be a bunch of issues that are marked, both area release engineering or area/release-eng, and also marked as help wanted. So if you want to take a look through the repo and see what you want to work on, this goes for patch release, branch managers, and release manager associates, as well as anyone who is in the periphery of release engineering and interested in jumping in. Please take a look at the help wanted stuff. And feel free to ask any questions on the issues. I think, Tim, that we should try to plan I was considering doing it for the release meeting next week, but that's going to be the retrospective. I think we should try to get a planning session, maybe a 2-hour thing, in the calendar somewhere between now and the 20th. I think past that, everyone will be disappeared for holiday stuff.
Well, let's see how the retro goes on Thursday, and if there's how much follow-on there is, but maybe we could slot something in next week still.
Okay. And also for the retro, so Lockie is going to be the 118 Emeritus Advisor. He's going to create a retro action items issue. I have assigned him the 116 retro items as well and unassign myself from that. The things that had updates, I've connected all of the dots between issues and PRs. The ones that need issues or keps were marked as need issue, need kept. So y'all can also take a look at that, because I know we're about to jump into the release team meeting for those of you who are attending. So here's that. Cool. All right. Any closing thoughts? All right. Well, thank you as usual for all your hard work. I will catch y'all soon. Later.
Adios, everybody. Peace.